Boo-too. My bad, guys. My video literally got interrupted by my boyfriend, which is typical. But where I left off was pretty much back where Andres pretty much drills into Oscar's head while Elena and Hector stand by. And basically they're performing pretty much like a surgery on his head. During an apocalypse, they're nowhere in a hospital, obviously. They're limited supply because they're in a hotel room and not a hospital. It's just quite disturbing. Really disturbing that they're performing a medical thing like that on Oscar's head with no supply, not in a hospital, not in a station, nothing. And it's just, ugh. But anyway, that very night, Madison pretty much joins Travis on the balcony of their hotel room and pretty much assures him that, what you did to Brandon and Derek, they deserved it. They killed your son. So you had nothing to worry about. And, she pretty much relates to him because she's like, yes, you killed Brandon and Derek, but they deserved it because they killed your son, and I myself have killed somebody. And she admits to, killing Celia in order to protect her son, Nick. Remember Celia, that one lady that was pretty much corrupting Nick and all that stuff? And yeah, and that whole little place of theirs that had a bunch of infected in a cage because they thought, pretty much they were like Herschel in the predecessor Walking Dead. They thought there was, there was a cure. They thought there was a cure. You know what I mean? They were just oblivious to the rest of the world. But anyway, they're like, she's trying to bond with Travis, saying, you're not the only one that's killed. We have to move on from that, and those two guys deserved it because they killed your son. I killed somebody to protect my own son. You know what I mean? And unfortunately, the surgery group, Oscar dies on the little operating table, and, Andres is all slamming his fist in anger. And Hector, he's, like, angry. And he's all ranting to Elena that like, Travis is all safe and cuddly warm in the little suite while Oscar is dead because of him, right? And Elena's reminding him, they made a deal with Madison in the beginning when it came to that bride's mother. Granted, they did not banish the mother, but she was pretty much the example, right? They're like, we're going to lock up this mother because she stabbed Strand. We're going to lock her up. But anyone else after the mother of the bride who hurts anyone in the hotel room gets banished. And that's the deal that Elena's reminding him of, right? So Hector and Andres pretty much barge into Travis's room and beat the heck out of him, right? And Andres pretty much holds a gun to Travis's head, saying, he's got to go and all that stuff. And this is what surprised me. When Andres holds that gun to Travis's head and it looks like he's about to pull the trigger, the most surprising thing I saw was the fact that Alicia, like a ninja that she is with her balisong butterfly knife, pretty much stabs Andres. And then a whole free-for-all melee starts right after that, to the point where the gun that Andres is holding ends up out of his hands on the floor, and Strand comes out of nowhere, because it's like, where did Strand come from? That's Travis's room. Is there a joint door between Travis's room and Strand's room? Because he just came out of nowhere. But Strand ends up grabbing the fallen gun and pretty much orders everyone to get out, right? And so Andres and Hector, they run, right? And as for Alicia, Travis, and Madison, and Strand pretty much tells them, we gotta run. And when he says that, it sounded like he was gonna go with them, because he's like, we gotta run. He didn't say, you guys gotta run. He didn't say, you guys have to run. He said, we have to run. So I thought he was gonna go with them, right? But unfortunately, as Travis, Madison, and Alicia managed to pile into a car outside the hotel, Strand gives the gun to Madison and decides to stay behind last minute. And it's like, Strand, I actually like you. I was sympathizing with you. I wanted you to stay with the group that you were with from the beginning. Strand! Why? And I was upset by this because Hector and Andres, they know. They were in the room. They saw Strand take the gun and order everybody out. They were there. So they pretty much could tell Elena and anyone else in that hotel that Strand was a part of it, right? And the fact that Strand stayed behind, knowing that, Andres and Hector knew that he was there with the gun. I know that Strand can make up an excuse and everything, but those two guys are going to be like, oh, Strand took the gun and told us to leave, right? He probably helped them get out. That means Strand could possibly most likely become their prisoner, or they're going to banish his butt somewhere else, right? And so that's why I'm really worried about the fact that Strand decided to stay behind, because they could imprison him, they could banish him, or they could beat the snot out of him and do one of the other two first choices, right? Travis, he's all accelerating out with his car and plows to the front gate and just leaves, right? And so, again, this group has split even more. We got them all together at one point, and then Chris and Travis separated, Nick separated, and then when they got to the hotel, Ophelia vanishes away from them. And now Strand's left behind and Chris is actually dead. So it's like, well, great. Now it's just the three of them. It's just Travis, Madison, and Alicia. Strand is left behind at the hotel. He stayed behind. Ophelia is somewhere in the U.S. And Nick is in still in La Colonia or nearby it because he left. And Chris is definitely dead. So this group is getting smaller and smaller and smaller every episode, I swear. But anyway, back to La Colonia, guys. Nick actually manages to return to La Colonia after spotting that helicopter and goes to Alejandro and pretty much tells him he saw a medevac helicopter. So apparently that helicopter is like a medical helicopter land in a camp nearby the border. And he pretty much tells Alejandro to give the villagers permission to flee out of La Colonia, because he thinks that, there's a camp where this helicopter was. And this camp could possibly help La Colonia, right? And Nick pretty much tells Alejandro that he and Luciana will take up the leadership and pretty much lead the villagers north to where the supposed camp and the helicopter were at, right? Back with Madison and the other two, they end up going to El Pelicano. Remember that little grocery place, right? They end up there because, Madison was there, and that was the one clue to Nick's whereabouts that she heard from, right? So they're all searching for Nick there, and they manage to discover the bodies of Francisco's family in the back of the empty market with bullet holes through their heads. And they're digging through their pockets. It's like, great, they're looting the dead, guys. This is bad. Horrible. I understand that they're dead and this is an apocalypse, but have some sense, man. Have some, gosh darn. But they loot Francisco's pockets and they find his driver license with a La Colonia address, right? Back to La Colonia, guys. Marco and the rest of the gangsters arrive at La Colonia. They shoot down the infected that are in the fence yard, and they enter the premises, and they notice that the entire town is deserted. And they're all celebrating victory, right? But apparently, it's not totally deserted because Alejandro is still there. He is hiding, and he's watching the group from his hiding spot, and he ends up going inside the school bus. Remember that school bus that pretty much separated La Colonia from the infected? Right? He goes in the bus. He manages to start up the bus. Marco hears the bus and runs toward the yard, but it's a little bit too late because Alejandro manages to start the bus and drive the bus forward, which pretty much unblocks the fence gap and allows all the infected to pretty much flood La Colonia, which I was like, that's pretty dope because if you look at Alejandro, he's obviously dying. The bite mark is finally getting to him. You can obviously see it, and this is pretty much his last hurrah. And I give Alejandro has some serious balls. Because despite the fact that he's dying, despite the fact that he's dying and all by himself at La Colonia, right? He does one last hurrah and manages to flood La Colonia with infected in order to kill Marco and his gang. And it's like, dude's got some serious balls. That is one major way to go out with a bang. If Alejandro's gonna die from that infected mark, he's gonna go out with a bang. And I love it. Props to Alejandro. I know I didn't like you in the beginning because I knew from the beginning when you first claimed to be immune, I knew that a big chunk of me knew that you were lying. That's why I was kind of about you about that. But the fact that you were doing that, that was your last hurrah. Props to Alejandro. Props. But anyway. We see that Nick and Luciana do manage to lead the entire village of La Colonia, the people anyway, toward the U.S. border. While Madison, Travis, and Alicia, shortly after the whole hurrah of Alejandro, Madison, Travis, and Alicia manage to arrive at La Colonia. And when they search for Nick there, Alicia stays behind in the yard and she notices the school bus that Alejandro's in, right? Back in the town square though, Travis and Madison, they encounter a huge herd of infected. And what we see when we saw some of the infected turn around, some of the infected included Marco and some of his gangsters. So those gangsters got what was coming. So bravo Alejandro, you killed Marco and the rest and his gangsters. That's the greatest hoorah I've ever seen in my life. But anyway, Madison and Travis find Alicia on the bus and she's actually tending to a barely alive Alejandro because he's definitely dying. And this was what I thought was interesting. Alejandro, when he sees Madison, he actually mistakes Madison for an angel. I was like, bruh. That was like the greatest thing ever. But the fact that Madison actually tells Alejandro she's looking for Nick. And Alejandro's like, in Spanish, she's like, you're Nick's mother, right? And you know, that confirmation. Alejandro informs Madison that Nick went to the border because he saw something. And then, unfortunately, Alejandro passes away before he could mention the camp, right? We all knew Alejandro was going to die. That bite mark and the fact that, you know, he was struggling to get into that bus in general before, you know, pulling it forward, we knew he was going to die. But the fact that he pulled off that bus thing, got Marco and his gangsters to get infected and die and infected and all that stuff, and the fact that he was able to give a little bit of information to Madison, that was pretty dope. So R.I.P. to Alejandro, you went out with a bang. But like, unfortunately he died before he mentioned that the thing that Nick saw was in fact a camp. He just told Madison Nick went to the border because he saw something. He died before he could mention the fact that it was a camp that he saw. But anyway, Nick, Luciana, and the rest of the Colonias, they arrive at the border crossing. And through binoculars, Nick actually sees the helicopter again leaving the refugee camp. And unfortunately, an armed survivor pops out of nowhere behind an abandoned vehicle because they're at the border and there's like a bunch of cars, right? And he comes from behind an abandoned vehicle and pretty much shoots everyone, and Luciana gets shot. A couple of other people get shot and killed. Luciana gets shot, but she's still alive. And an entire armed group comes out of nowhere, like freaking popping daisies coming out of nowhere, and opens fire on all the Colonia people. They all take off. A few Colonias that were in the front of the group end up dying, like maybe like 5 or 6 of them die. Again, Luciana got shot, but she's still alive. Nick is trying to get Luciana, and like they're trying to hide behind a booth, but unfortunately they're captured by one of those freaking armed survivors, right? And the armed men pretty much separate Nick and Luciana while they're trying to get back to each other and pretty much shove them to the ground. And I think one of them actually kicks Nick in the face. And back on the bus, Alicia hands Madison her body song, right? And you know, they have to stab him in the head. They have no choice, so that he doesn't turn. And so this episode was interesting, and it was a good way to end season 2. Obviously, we saw in the season finale that Ophelia was cornered by what seems like an American soldier, and Nick and Luciana got captured by random freaking armed people coming out of nowhere. So